大家好，我是戴淑萱，我来自英国。今天我想来分享5个有关英国社会阶层制度的误会。我发现，当我和来自其他国家的朋友讨论这个话题的时候，他们经常对英国阶级制度有着完全不同的印象。这个话题其实很复杂，所以今天我就是想来分享我自己的观点。Alright, so this is going to be a long topic, but I'm really excited to share with you about it because I think it's really fascinating. Now, who am I to talk about this? Well, I'm from England. That's kind of all the credentials that I have, but let's get started with the video. Now, I just want to preempt this video by saying some very important caveats. The first one is that people have wildly different opinions about this topic. You'll find some people that think that the class system in the UK is as rigid today as it was in the past and dictates everything about the way we live our lives. And on the other end of the spectrum, you'll find people that think that the class system is pretty much irrelevant today and is no longer even something that we think about at all. So it's a complex subject with no hard and fast rules, and I saw a quote on some forum on the internet that said that the idea of class is so subjective as to be meaningless. So that's just something to bear in mind as we go through this video, and I try to put some terms around this and I try to explain it in a way that makes sense. So what is class? Well, you might know that class is a division of groups of people based on social, economic and cultural status. The most traditional way of thinking about this in the context of the UK is the 3 classes: working class, middle class and upper class. Now, we might also have what's called the lower class, which tends to be forgotten about. The term lower class is seen as a controversial term and might refer to people who are long-term unemployed or homeless. Some people might include that class in their definition. The working class has historically been made up of unskilled or semi-skilled workers, typically with no university or even college education. Historically, the working class have been factory workers and labourers. Today, you might find people working in retail, the food industry, or lower class admin jobs. As I said, don't hold too tightly to these definitions. We might think of the classic image of a chimney sweep with a Cockney accent, but that's from long ago, before the 1960s, that kind of stereotype.
What I do. Hello, art lovers.
When I was growing up, there was the term chav, which was used to describe people that might have more loud or like brutish behaviour.
Excuse me? Hey, I'm talking to Rochelle! I can't believe you've just done that.
Yeah, I want chat.
Another chat. I'm sorry, we're not a chip shop. Whatever.
They might wear fake designer clothes, this kind of aesthetic, but this term chav is definitely not an accepted term to be used anymore. And of course, all of the working class don't display loud or brutish behaviour. That would be an oversimplification. Next, we have the middle class. And in the UK, this is a very large category of people, and they're not considered to be badly off by any stretch of the imagination. They are simply not upper class, which we'll get to next. This includes white-collar professionals, office workers, businessmen, teachers, journalists, nurses, depending on your definition. Doctors are usually part of the middle class, and lawyers, shop owners. Middle-class people might own nice things and have their own house, but they're usually slaving away working to pay back their mortgage. And you could find them doing a range of hobbies, from golf, running tennis, to more intellectual pursuits like reading, playing chess. Basically, many people that you meet will fall into this category. Next, we come to the upper class, also known as the elite, and this also might be associated with aristocracy depending on your definition. These people are usually extremely wealthy. They might own their own properties, plural, and have lots of land, usually in the south of England, and they might have a title like Lord or Earl in some rare cases.
Lancaster. Golly gumdrops, what a turn-up!
There's a slang term, toff, which has negative connotations. A toff might think that they are superior, but working class people might see them as lacking practical skills, being out of touch, and having no clue about the real world. Some rare families might still have high social status because of their origins, not because they're still wealthy. But we don't have a rigid caste system in the UK, and to be honest, the upper class is becoming a very shrinking thing, which we'll come back to in a second. Typical upper class hobbies include sailing, polo, horse riding, collecting fine art, seeing live theatre and classical music, these kinds of things. So just to reiterate that lots of people don't know what class they belong to, the distinctions are very outdated and the boundaries are becoming more blurred because, for example, you might have gone to a very expensive school, but you hate classical music and you like pop music instead. Or your parents were very wealthy, but you went to a state school, but then you went to a good university, but now you have an average job. Basically, everyone's situation is different and you might have elements of the upper class way of living or elements of middle class, working class mixed into one person's existence and lifestyle. So there is actually a quiz you can take online. It's called the Great British Class Calculator. So if you're interested to know what class you would fall under, you can go and take that. The link's down below. So some people say that the idea of class is supposed to be about social mobility, or the access that someone has to opportunities, which is why it's often a governmental focus, providing things like free education, so that more people from different backgrounds can get access to influential positions in society. So by and large, perceived ideas of class could probably do with an update. Let's move on to the 5 myths that I want to get to today. Myth number 1. Everyone is struggling to be upper class. Brits perceive this thing about class very differently to the rest of the world. I think the most striking statistic is that only 1% of the British public identify themselves as upper class. So this either means that the upper class is shrinking to the point of non-existence, or no one wants to be associated with this term. Here's a quote from the magazine Foreign Policy. Many foreigners think posh is a compliment, but only posh people view it as such, and even then, not always. Everyone else in Britain uses it as an insult. To be called posh outside of the houses of the posh is to be called spoilt, entitled, or pretentious. Okay, so you might be thinking, oh, well, calling the rich pretentious and spoilt, isn't that just a cop-out? Isn't everyone just jealous because they actually secretly want to be upper class? This is a real can of worms, and I suppose it really depends on the person, and you have to speak to people about it. Maybe lots of people like aspects of the upper class lifestyle, but I reckon a large majority of people would say they would never want to be upper class. Sure, most people want to have more money. People want to be wealthy, and it would be nice to own a lot of land. But the category of upper class comes with its own brand and type of person, which is perceived quite negatively by the vast majority of Brits. In fact, what you'll find is that there's strong cultures and identities that people are proud of from other social categories. And particularly in the working class, there's historically been quite a pride associated with this culture. Again, really depends on the person. I'm not saying everyone loves being working class. I'm sure there's loads of people that hate it and want to sort of rise up, as it were. But if we think of things like pubs, football matches, these things that are now heralded as like the pinnacle of British culture were originally working class. Pubs, for example, you find them on every corner. They're very celebrated as a place to go and hang out, socialise, play games, chill with your friends. There's also things like traditional working class values, and that might include being really down to earth and friendly and like relatable, not caring so much about money, valuing the little things, really appreciating what you have, living in the present. I'm not saying that rich people don't do any of this, but this is one stereotype that exists about working class people. By contrast, they might look at the upper class and think how awfully serious it all seems, and how vain and how shallow, people caring about money and status and all of this. It might seem cold and unfriendly and not relatable. So this is, again, definitely not to say that everyone feels like this, and I'm sure that lots of people are unhappy about their status and would love to be a different class. But for the working class people who are genuinely proud of being working class and happy with who they are, you might still say, oh, but they're just kidding themselves, right? Secretly, they're still jealous. And to be fair, yeah, maybe it's a reaction to being marginalised historically, of being not ashamed about your culture, which if you think about it, it's just ridiculous. Why should anyone be ashamed of their culture? Why should anyone be looked down on? Like, the whole thing is very unfair, and this is the majority consensus in England. At the end of the day, we have to remember that the vast majority of Brits are working or middle class. Up to 50% say that they're working class according to some statistics. I'll get back to this in a second because the working class also seems to be shrinking. But basically, it's a much more widespread culture than the upper class culture. Another case in point, I asked a few of my friends who by no stretch of the imagination are poor people. I would say that they're firmly middle class. And I asked them, if you had all the money in the world, would you send your kids to an expensive private school? And they adamantly said, no, they would not. I think if anything, they feel that that would cocoon a person in a bubble of unreality. So again, you have to ask people more deeply about this, but this is what they said. They would not want to send their child to an expensive private school, one of the key markers of being upper class. So they're basically saying, even if they had the choice, they would choose not to be upper class. So yeah, I'm not saying that no one in the UK wants to go to private school, but I just think it's quite interesting that that seems to go starkly against the view that many people from other countries have, that British people are all trying to be upper class. Another example, working class aesthetic is seen as cool even among rich people. In fact, most people don't want to look rich. The people at my university who went to the most expensive private schools looked the most homeless. I'm not joking, this is real. The popular fashion shop Urban Outfitters, which is for young people, has a classic 1980s to 2000s working class aesthetic style. Why? It gives you street credibility, it makes you relatable. It's just cool. You can get millionaires dressing like they have nowhere to live. It seems absurd, but it's true. Again, not saying that everyone dresses like this. You'll also find jokes about the upper classes. It's seen as a quaint, kind of outdated, unusual aspect of culture that many people generally find absurd and quite laughable. If we're thinking of other potential reasons why lower class people might be proud of their culture, I guess it could be like fish in water. I guess you don't know what you don't know. If everyone around you is the same class as you, you don't really realize the state of your deprivation, I suppose, until you're exposed to the other side. Now, it could be well true that people just haven't really thought of it. It doesn't seem like a realistic goal to have. You just kind of get on with it and you're not really thinking about, oh, I want to be that class, because you hardly ever come across it or see it or know anyone who's like that. They might be striving for more wealth and achievement for sure. I mean, we can see this in the fact that now around 38% of people go to university, which is a massive increase since the 1900s. So for sure, people want to better their life. They want more opportunities and they want to open doors for themselves. But this isn't necessarily anything to do with class. In fact, I think the main people who might be striving to be upper class actually come from other countries. People might look at the British upper class system and think, oh, how luxurious, how lovely, I want that. Or there might be some kind of longing for like order and hierarchy and structure in the world. I suppose it's seen as the pinnacle of society and maybe the global society. Now, we can see this from the fact that a large majority of the people who own properties in the most expensive areas of London, like Grosvenor Estate and Belgravia, are from other places like South Asia or Eastern Europe. The ownership of many properties in these places has changed many times and goes to the person with the most money. So around the world, we've all heard of these upper class things like Knightsbridge in London, Harrods, Eton College, Oxford and Cambridge universities. This upper class thing is a brand that's become global. So to conclude this point, the upper class are A, shrinking rapidly, almost to the point of non-existence among local Brits. B, being upper class is generally not something seen as desirable by most Brits because it comes with being labelled as a toff. And C, this upper class thing, I think, is being largely chased by people from other countries. I think what's interesting about this is I suppose it shows the things that humans strive towards. They want status, power, recognition and money. They want to feel good about themselves, essentially. I would argue that unfortunately, the posh lifestyle is probably not going to give us that feeling. What we do know is the class structure creates a lot of anxiety for people. Who's to say who's at the top of this imaginary food chain? Like, does anyone really actually want to be at the center of the royal family? So in my opinion, it is a load of nonsense. Class doesn't make you better or worse than anyone else. Here's a quote from some random forum on the internet. There are fun people and arsehole people scattered throughout the income and class sections of society. Beautiful. By the way, I have recognized the irony of where I am. Secret, this is not my house. Because this is turning into such a long video, I'm just going to wrap it up here and we will continue with this next time. Thanks for watching today. Bye.